I didn't meet Carlo until 1994 when he had applied for a clinical research fellowship in Oxford in a department called PERU. You might think Peru was some sort of exotic collaboration with the Andes and nice trips to South America, but it was a rather grand term for the Paediatric Endocrine Research Unit, which hung out in a very small place at the back of the obstetric unit. So Peru was a very small group of endocrine and diabetes researchers. Some of them clinicians, Tim Cheetham, you'll hear about later, and Julie Edge, remain colleagues for a lifetime. Others, Lynn Ahmed there, and Angie Watts. Lynn Ahmed was our auxologist and Angie ran the lab. And those two moved to Cambridge when we moved to Cambridge and continued to collaborate for very many years. So at the time, our major interest was in type 1 diabetes, and in particular, the interface between diabetes and endocrinology. So I think we all see type 1 diabetes as basically being the need for insulin replacement. And certainly these two gentlemen and their dog and this rather strange looking liquid saved the lives of millions and millions of children in subsequent years. But we're now coming up to nearly 100 years since Banting and Best. So where have we got to? Well, you'll hear Roman and his team that the insulins have progressed enormously. We have many new insulins, we have new sensors, we have new pumps. But we still have quite a lot of difficulty in keeping control of sugars good enough to prevent long-term complications in diabetes. And in fact, the long-term outlook is still rather sad. If you develop type 1 diabetes under the age of 10, you have a loss of life expectancy of anything between 10 and 14 years, largely due to cardiovascular or renal complications which develop in adult life. So we were very interested in the whole issue of what's good and bad about insulin delivery. And in particular, this question, why do we give insulin into the wrong place? So normally, the pancreatic beta cells put insulin straight into the portal circulation, which goes directly to the liver, where 50% of the insulin is extracted every time blood passes through the liver. So in normal circumstances, you're seeing very high portal insulin levels and relatively low peripheral insulin levels. In contrast, in general care of diabetes, we give the insulin subcutaneously into the peripheral circulation. Portal levels are very low, whereas we have very high peripheral insulin levels. And we were interested in how these abnormalities in type 1 diabetes could relate to diabetic control and complications. So Carlo, along with a lot of other fellows that came to Oxford and Cambridge, carried out a number of physiological experiments exploring this relationship between low portal insulin levels, low IGF-1, a compensatory increase in growth hormone, which leads to an increase in lipolysis and free fatty acid production. So we did a number of studies suppressing growth hormone, increasing growth hormone, suppressing lipolysis. And overall, they confirmed that in type 1 diabetes, this situation of low IGF-1, high growth hormone, high free fatty acids was associated with insulin resistance and relatively poor glycemic control. So we came up with the hypothesis that we could suppress growth hormone, we could suppress lipolysis, but why not just put IGF-1 back into the circulation, because that should suppress the growth hormone and the lipolysis. And initial experimental studies suggested this was indeed the case. The short-term administration of IGF-1 did do what we said it would do. But it fell to Carlo to move on into the randomized placebo-controlled trial of IGF-1 in type 1 diabetes. This was a very ambitious study. It was international, Sweden, France, and the UK. It was multi-center. We wanted to study 2 doses of IGF-1, and we wanted to do it in people who had very good insulin replacement, i.e. they were on multiple insulin injections. So the study went well initially. We were supported by Pharmacia, a drug company. And about a year into the project, they decided that they didn't want to pursue this particular indication for their drug. So they gave us the funding to continue, but Carlo and our clinical trials person were left with running the study, which heroically they managed to do and completed successfully. And the result was very good. The 2 doses of IGF-1 did indeed improve glycemic control, that's this HbA1c, during the 6-month treatment period, and then things went back afterwards. So a highly successful study, which Carlo got published in the Lancet and subsequently submitted to Dundee University for his MD. So you might ask, where is IGF-1 treatment now? Well, like many treatments for relatively small indications like type 1 diabetes, the drug companies were very loath to take it forwards unless they could see a bigger market. Even within the last 2 or 3 years, Carlo has been asked to present at international meetings about adjuvant treatments in type 1, and he, after reviewing all the literature, maintained that IGF-1 remains the best adjuvant treatment in type 1, as it's so logically coherent. So maybe it'll come back again one day. So what happened next? Well, as Pauline said, Carlo moved from Oxford to Cambridge, where he took up the post as clinical lecturer and was later promoted to senior lecturer and consultant pediatrician at Edinburgh Hospital. In Cambridge, Carlo's career really took off, and you're going to see this picture all over the place, I think, during these presentations. Fortunately, his career wasn't as a tribute BG band, but I must say he was very good in the part. No, his career really related to the fact that he collaborated so widely and got involved in so many different projects. I've mentioned a few here, and you'll hear about many more as we go through these talks. Not only was he involved in lots of major international projects, the Cambridge Burpee Growth Study you'll hear about, but Carlo also worked very closely with the NIHR, National Institute of Health Research, Clinical Research Network in East Anglia. He worked for Diabetes UK in their CSGs. And it really was this very widespread interest and collaboration that led to Carlo's success as an academic and as a clinician. So you only need to look up, he published over 150 papers. Robert will tell you about the Oxford Handbook of Pediatrics. But I think the bottom one's very important. Carlo was a senior author in many of the current and past ISPAD, that's the International Society for Pediatric and Adolescent Diabetes, their clinical practice guidelines, which have been seminal series really informing people about how to attain good management in type 1 diabetes. Just a couple of slides to remind us of some of those studies. This is the ADIT team. ADIT was a collaboration between Canada, Australia, and the UK. Fantastic group of people who delivered the first randomized controlled trial of statins and ACE inhibitors in adolescents with type 1 diabetes. Recent years, Carlo also got very involved in ENODIA, which is a major European consortium looking to understand and prevent the development of type 1 diabetes, both in newly diagnosed people and those at risk. It's an industry academic consortium, but with lots of partners stretched across many countries. Cambridge took the lead in the person of Carlo in the development of the clinical networks, particularly in the UK, but also internationally. And he, because of his very close links with the networks in East Anglia, in particular diabetes clinical networks, he was able to set up a network which really encouraged all of the hospitals in the region to participate in Enodia, either by sending patients to Cambridge or identifying patients they could study locally. And it still remains the model for many other networks that are being set up across Europe with similar goals. So coming towards the end, this is Carlo's office, which I shared with him for the last 2 or 3 years. Wonderful experience. Carlo would pedal in the morning from wherever, a bit pooped, but very early in the morning. And we would natter for a half an hour or so, often about sport, wine, food, all the things that Carlo enjoyed so much. But also grumbled every morning about politics. And I had no idea what Carlo and I would say about Boris, Trump, and COVID. It would just be expletives, I think. But those are wonderful mornings, which I enjoyed very much, and I miss very much. We all have a favorite photograph of Carlo. This is my favorite photograph because it reflects so many aspects of Carlo's personality, his curiosity, his quizzicalness, the fact his wry humor, the fact that he's not going to hesitate in stepping forward to get things right if they need changing. So I miss him as a dear friend, and thank you.